if I told you that playing through one man's entire gaming catalog could reveal the secret to understanding genius? For the past 30 days, I've been living inside Hideo Kojima's mind, playing every game he's ever made in chronological order. From Metal Gear to Death Stranding, I've uncovered patterns that most people miss, connections that explain his most controversial decisions, and moments that show exactly why Kojima sees the world differently than the rest of us. But to understand how someone becomes a visionary who predicts the future through interactive entertainment, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the experiences that shaped him long before he ever touched a game controller.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our industry icon, Mr. Hideo Kojima.
Imagine this, you're 13, your dad just passed away, and every day after school you come home to an empty house. That was Kojima's reality. His mom worked late, so he'd flip on the TV and escape into movies. Not just the fun stuff either. His family had this wild tradition of watching everything together, from black and white dramas to full-on horror movies. Most parents would have said no to that. Kojima's just hit play. But he didn't just watch, he studied. While other kids were outside, Kojima was breaking down scenes, learning how tension worked, how characters grew, why certain shots hit harder than others. The loneliness wasn't just something he lived with, it turned into his teacher. Stories filled the gaps where people weren't. Characters became company. That kind of isolation, it shaped how he sees the world. Most people think loneliness is just sadness. For Kojima, it was a reason to understand human connection. How we relate, how we communicate, and what happens when we don't. Every film he watched became a crash course in psychology, even if he didn't know it yet. And he didn't stop at watching, he started making. Kojima and his friends would shoot homemade zombie flicks on Super 8 cameras. Most kids would have laughed those off, but Kojima was already thinking like a director. He wasn't just having fun, he was learning how to build suspense, frame shots, and cut scenes for impact. He was basically in film school just without knowing it. Then reality kicked in. Japan's film industry wasn't exactly easy to break into. No real film schools, no open doors, just gatekeeping. Kojima realized that becoming a filmmaker the traditional way was probably not going to happen. So he pivoted. His family wanted him to pick something safe and stable. He went with economics, something serious enough to make them happy, but open-ended enough to keep his options alive. Weirdly enough, that choice actually paid off. While he was learning about supply and demand, he was still watching films and studying stories. It gave him a blend that not many people have, the creativity of a filmmaker with the mindset of a business strategist. Then, he discovered video games. It was the early 80s. Most people saw games as toys. Kojima saw something else, a new kind of cinema, a way to tell stories people didn't just watch, but played. He didn't want to direct movies anymore. He wanted to build experiences. And suddenly, all of it clicked. The solitude, the films, the degree, it all added up. The loneliness helped him understand people. The movies gave him structure. The business training helped him think strategically. He was built for games, he just didn't know it yet. So when Kojima joined Konami in 1986, he wasn't just another grad looking for a job. He was a self-taught filmmaker, a wannabe director, and a storyteller with business sense. Konami stuck him on MSX games, a footnote in the industry at the time. They had no idea they were handing the keys to someone who'd soon flip the entire medium on its head. When Kojima started at Konami in '86, he thought he was going to reinvent the industry. Big dreams, big ideas. Then they gave him a game about a penguin delivering medicine. No, seriously, his first real project was Penguin Adventure. Not exactly groundbreaking stuff. When I played it, I couldn't believe it was the same guy who made Metal Gear. The game felt like every other basic platformer from the 80s. But that's the point. This failure snapped him back to reality. Kojima realized he wasn't just some prodigy just yet. He had to earn it. More importantly, he learned a hard truth. Working within tight limits can actually make you more creative. That lesson paid off the next year when he was asked to make a military action game for the MX2 called none other than Metal Gear. Now, this machine was a joke compared to the NES. It couldn't handle lots of enemies on screen or bullets flying everywhere like a proper shooter. Most developers would have thrown in the towel. Kojima didn't. If the MSX couldn't handle big action scenes, then what if you just avoided fights altogether? That's how stealth gameplay was born. Not from a bold artistic vision, but from hardware limitations. And it worked. The famous cardboard box? Pure workaround. The MSX couldn't do complex animations for hiding, so the box was a simple trick the hardware could actually handle. The alert sound and the exclamation point? Also technical shortcuts, just ways to communicate danger without using much memory. Even the codec, the in-game radio calls that became iconic, started as a workaround. Kojima wanted story, but the MSX couldn't do cutscenes or character models, so he had Snake talk to people through a radio. That's how he got around the tech wall, and somehow made it feel personal and immersive at the same time. These limitations didn't just shape the game, they shaped the entire stealth genre. Think Assassin's Creed, Hitman, Splinter Cell. They all owe something to the weird design hacks Kojima had to make just to get Metal Gear working. And when you replay Metal Gear now knowing all of this, it does hit different. You can see how every element had to pull double duty. The box was hiding, comedy, and puzzle solving. The radio was exposition, tutorial, and character development. Everything had to matter. Metal Gear didn't succeed in spite of its limitations, it succeeded because of them. And Kojima learned that real creativity doesn't come from having everything, it comes from having almost nothing and still figuring it out. Snatcher is what happens when Kojima falls head over heels for Blade Runner and decides to make his own version, except this time, you're not just watching the story, you're in it. The year was 1988. Most games were still about shooting stuff or jumping on things. Kojima dropped Snatcher, a full-blown cyberpunk visual novel drenched in neon, rain, and existential dread. The city? Straight up Blade Runner vibes. The questions, what makes someone human? What happens when memory and identity blur? And Kojima wasn't shy about it either. He wore his influences loud and proud. He wasn't copying Blade Runner, he was asking, what if you could live inside it? Instead of action, Snatcher focused on conversations, investigation, and choices. You weren't blasting through enemies, you were solving crimes, picking apart conspiracies, and uncovering a terrifying secret. And because the MSX was super limited, he had to get crafty. No big animations, no full-blown cutscenes, just sharp writing, clever sound design, and detailed portraits that pulled you in. The system couldn't even hold the full game. Kojima had to chop it down from 5 acts to 3 just to make it fit. That meant every single line, every character moment, every sound had to work overtime. Nothing was wasted. What's wild is how much atmosphere he squeezed out of so little. You could hear the rain, feel the city's grime, and even hear characters speak, something that was barely happening in games back then. It truly felt alive.
Gillian, I'm glad I got you. I got a call from Katrina. The turbocycle seems to be out of control.
What the? We've got you now, Snatcher scum.
Kojima also started messing with the fourth wall here. Characters would joke about being in a game. It was subtle, but it planted the seed for what would become one of his most signature moves, blurring the line between player and character. And let's not forget the tone. Heavy themes, sure, identity, AI, humanity, but also dark humor to keep it grounded. Kojima knew they would need to keep players invested through long dialogue scenes. You needed some levity. It wasn't just about delivering a message, it was about entertaining you while doing it. Even though Snatcher didn't blow up commercially, it became a cult classic and a turning point. It proved that games could go toe-to-toe with film and literature in exploring big ideas. Everything Kojima would later do, atmospheric storytelling, character-driven narratives, breaking the rules, got its first real test drive here. Snatcher wasn't just a passion project, it was proof that video games could be more than fun, and they could make you think. When I booted up Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, I wasn't expecting to find the secret playbook for every stealth game made in the last 30 years, but that's exactly what this is. This game doesn't just improve on the first Metal Gear, it perfected the formula. It took all the lessons from the original and leveled them up across the board, and hidden inside all that polish, ideas that the rest of the industry wouldn't catch up to for decades. The game opens with a 7-minute cutscene in 1990. Most games back then dropped you straight into the action. Kojima, he made you sit and listen to setup, world building, and dialogue because he knew if players didn't care about the story, none of the stealth would matter. That intro became the blueprint for how cinematic games build narrative before gameplay even begins. Then there's the enemy AI. In the first Metal Gear, guards were, let's be honest, dumb and easy to predict and easy to exploit. But in Metal Gear 2, they got smarter. They had bigger vision cones, they could hear noise, they'd actually investigate sounds, chase you across screens. You couldn't just sneak by and cheese the system, you had to think. The level design stepped up too. Gone were the basic hallways. Now you had full-on facilities with multiple ways to get in and out. It made you feel clever, like every mission had options. And that idea? It's in every stealth game now. From Hitman to Splinter Cell to Dishonored, they all trace back to this. Snake himself got more moves. He could crawl under things, bang on walls to create distractions, and manipulate guard behavior. Small changes, but they completely rewired how you approach stealth. Suddenly, you weren't just avoiding enemies, you were controlling the battlefield. And the story was way deeper. This wasn't just rescue missions, shoot bad guys. The plot had real political commentary. The characters had actual arcs. Kojima was writing like games deserve to have complexity, and this was proof it could work. Looking back, it's wild how many mechanics from Metal Gear 2 became staples. AI patterns, sound-based detection, multi-path level design, strategic distraction, it's all here long before most people even had a word for stealth game. The structure was also way ahead of its time. Linear missions with open-ended solutions. You got objectives, but how you completed them was up to you. That exact structure is now the gold standard for stealth games. You could see its DNA in games like Thief, The Last of Us, and The Phantom Pain even years later. And the attention to detail? Insane. Enemies noticed open doors. They reacted to footprints in snow. They remembered if they'd seen you before. These were PS1 era mechanics in a 1990 MSX2 game that only came out in Japan. Playing Metal Gear 2 now, it feels like discovering the Rosetta Stone of the stealth genre. Kojima wasn't just making a better game, he was quietly inventing the rules everyone else would follow, and it was the blueprint before anyone realized they needed one. Policenauts is the game almost no one talks about, but it connects everything Kojima had done up to that point with everything he was about to do next. It didn't get a global release, but it's the key to understanding how he made the jump from 2D stealth to full-blown cinematic storytelling. Released in 1994, Policenauts plays like a buddy cop anime with a hard sci-fi twist. Think Lethal Weapon meets Blade Runner. Right from the jump, the vibe is loud and clear. Over-the-top characters, big emotional stakes, and a mystery that unfolds in space. It's Kojima tapping into his film brain again, but this time with way more polish.
久しぶり28年ぶり
しかしジョナサン・イングラム久しぶりジョナサン・イングラムか懐かしいな
ロレイン車から離れろ
You play as Jonathan Ingram, a cop who wakes up after being cryogenically frozen for 25 years. Now he's trying to solve a murder in a giant space colony, but the real story is about what happens when time, memory, and identity don't line up. The people he knew have changed, the world has moved on, and he's stuck trying to catch up. Gameplay-wise, it's another point-and-click visual novel, but way more interactive than Snatcher. You're scanning environments, grilling suspects, piecing together clues, and it's slower paced, sure, but the immersion is on another level. You're not just reading a story, you're digging into it. The world building here is nuts. The space colony has its own politics, its own culture, even its own slang. Every NPC you meet has a backstory. Every room has details that hint at something deeper. You can feel Kojima flexing that storytelling muscle, pushing to see how far he can go without turning the whole thing into a movie. And then there's the ending. It's not just a cutscene, it's a full-blown cinematic climax with closure, payoff, and emotion. Long before people were calling games interactive films, Kojima was already making them. And it's crazy how Metal Gear Solid mechanics actually show up here first. Long dialogue scenes, slick transitions between story and gameplay, and a deep focus on character psychology. It's clear he was using this game as a rehearsal. He was testing what he could get away with, and it worked. Most people missed it because it never officially released outside of Japan, but fans who played it later realized it's the missing link. It's how Kojima got from Metal Gear 2 to Metal Gear Solid. The big leap wasn't overnight. It was built here. Policenauts didn't blow up, but it didn't need to. It was proof that Kojima could build a world, tell a complex story, and make it feel personal, all inside a video game. And it set the stage for everything he would do next. Metal Gear Solid hit the PlayStation in 1998 and changed the game, literally. It didn't just push the stealth genre forward, it redefined what games could be, blending action, cinema, and absurdity into one tight package. One minute you're sneaking through enemy territory while thinking about nuclear disarmament, the next you're hiding in a cardboard box while a guard complains about his bladder. And somehow, it all works beautifully. Kojima found a balance between heavy themes and straight-up weirdness that made this game unforgettable and an absolute classic. And thanks to the PlayStation's power, Kojima could finally let loose. The game had full 3D environments, actual voice acting, and long cutscenes that looked and sounded like a movie. After years of working around hardware limitations, Kojima finally had the tools he needed to match his ambition. But what really stood out was how Metal Gear Solid delivered big ideas without ever feeling preachy. It tackled the military-industrial complex, gene editing, and trauma in war, but always in a way that kept you hooked. You could engage with those ideas as deeply as you wanted, or just enjoy the stealth and boss fights. And those boss fights? Next level, man. Every one of them was designed to be memorable, from both gameplay and narrative perspective. Psycho Mantis read your memory card and made your controller move. This wasn't just a gimmick, it was Kojima reminding you that games can mess with you in ways movies never could. Then there's the emotional punch. Facing off with Gray Fox wasn't just about reflexes, it was a showdown loaded with guilt, memory, and consequence. Sniper Wolf, you didn't just beat her, you learned her story, and maybe even felt bad doing it. These moments hit hard because Kojima made you care first, then made you fight. The Codex system also deserves some credit. One moment you're getting tactical tips, the next you're listening to conversations about love, loss, or it added depth, gave characters personality, and kept the tone bouncing between serious and hilarious.
No matter how far data technology advances, you'll never be able to penetrate the human heart.
You're wrong. It's just a matter of time.
But first you have to try to understand human emotions, Mei Ling.
And how do I do that?
You have to allow yourself to fall in love with someone.
The impact of Metal Gear Solid was immediate. Developers across the industry took notes. Long cutscenes, more games started adding them. Complex villains, suddenly everyone had a tragic backstory. Even games that weren't stealth-focused borrowed the cinematic style. What made it work was tone. Kojima never felt the need to pick between being smart and being fun. One scene could make you laugh, the next could leave you quiet. That freedom to be both things at once became the magic formula, and no one else did it quite like him. Metal Gear Solid didn't just prove that games could be cinematic, it showed that games could say something, mean something, and still be fun as hell. It was the first modern video game in every sense of the word. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty wasn't just a sequel, it was a warning, and almost nobody caught it. Back in 2001, most people played it, got confused, and moved on. The switch from Snake to Raiden threw everyone off.
Raiden, the entire mission is in your hands now. Do you understand?
The story got weird fast. AI conspiracies, fake memories, and characters breaking the fourth wall. It felt like Kojima had gone off the deep end. But now, it looks like he saw the future. The game isn't about terrorists or nanomachines. It's about how information can be manipulated, filtered, and weaponized. It's about how we slowly lose our grip on what's real. And in the age of algorithms, deep fakes, and social media echo chambers, this all hits way too close to home. The main villain isn't even a person, it's an AI called GW, designed to control the flow of digital information. It doesn't destroy cities, it just tweaks what you see. It feeds you the right lies at the right time. It creates a world where nothing is totally false, but nothing is fully true either. Sound familiar? Kojima predicted a future where truth is curated, where people live in personalized realities, where misinformation spreads faster than facts, and he did it before Facebook was even a thing. The game talks about meme culture, information overload, and society being flooded with meaningless noise. These weren't buzzwords in 2001, today there are everyday problems. And Kojima didn't just stop with the themes, he made the game's structure part of the message too. Switching to Raiden wasn't just a twist, it was a way to shake the player out of comfort. Suddenly you weren't in control, you didn't know what was going on. Just like the characters, you were being manipulated. And the long cutscenes were intentional too. The codec calls were deliberate. Kojima wanted players to feel disoriented because that's what the game was about. Confusion, distortion, and control. And the fourth wall breaking moments were insane. The kernel starts glitching out, giving nonsense orders, telling you to turn off the game. It was a direct line to the player's brain and a reminder that this wasn't just a game, it was a message.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
Not to mention the attention to detail, like ice cubes melting, shadows reacting to light sources, guards remembering your last attack patterns. It was technically stunning. This was Kojima at his best, and he was trying to make you uncomfortable. And now, years later, everything he warned us about has come true. He used a AAA sequel to ask, what happens when you can't trust reality? And the scariest part is, that's what everyone is asking now. In 2003, Kojima released Boktai The Sun Is In Your Hand, and it might be the weirdest thing he's ever done. It's a vampire hunting game on the Game Boy Advance, where your weapon runs on real sunlight. No, not in the game, in real life. The cartridge had a UV sensor built into it. If you wanted to beat the bosses, you had to go outside and soak up some sun. No sunlight, no power, no progress, and no excuses. It wasn't just a gimmick, the sensor was smart enough to tell the difference between sunlight and artificial light. So no, you couldn't just cheat with a flashlight. You had to step out the front door, face the sky, and play your video game in broad daylight. And yeah, that's hilarious, but it's also kind of brilliant. Kojima saw how games were turning players into shut-ins, and instead of yelling about it, he designed a solution. He made a game that forced people to interact with the real world. It wasn't just clever, it was genuinely ahead of its time. Think about it, this was over a decade before Pokemon Go blew up. Years before people were talking about screen time and the health risks of nonstop gaming, Kojima was already there, pushing for a healthier relationship between games and real life. The game itself was solid too. You play as Django, a vampire hunter using a solar-powered gun. You crawl through dungeons, fight monsters, and when it's time to take on the big boss, you better hope the sun's still out. The tension is real because if the sun goes down, your gun becomes useless. And it wasn't all just sunlight tricks. The game had proper stealth mechanics, traps, strategy. You had to think, but the way it connected the in-game systems to your physical environment, that was the magic. This kind of real-world integration would go on to influence Kojima's later work in ways that aren't quite as obvious at first. Metal Gear Solid 4 had elements that changed depending on your PS3's internal clock. Death Stranding used weather and terrain as core parts of gameplay. Boktai planted the seed. Even though it didn't sell huge numbers, Boktai showed that Kojima wasn't just about storytelling or high-end graphics. He cared about the why behind a game, what it was saying, what it was doing to players, and how it could be used for more than just escape. Most developers never even think about this stuff, but Kojima built a solar sensor into a Game Boy cart because he believed video games could nudge people towards a better life. That's not just clever game design, that's vision. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is when everything just clicked to perfection. It's the moment Kojima took all the ideas he'd been refining for years and made the best version of them. If the earlier games were experiments, this one was the full realization. No more proving himself, just execution at the absolute highest level.
Put it simply, in order to avoid a full-scale nuclear conflict, we have to prove that America was not involved in that explosion. You're the only one capable of pulling this off. You were her last apprentice.
I'm not a hired killer.
I'm not your boss anymore.
Why'd you defect?
I didn't.
The jungle setting flipped the entire stealth formula. You weren't sneaking through sterile hallways anymore. You were surviving out in the wild. Tall grass, thick trees, rivers, cliffs, every part of the environment mattered, and it looked and felt more immersive than anything at the time. But it wasn't just about hiding. You had to eat. You had to treat wounds. If Snake got shot or broke a bone, you had to patch him up. If you didn't feed him, his stomach would growl loud enough for enemies to actually hear you in the game. The game made survival part of the gameplay, and it actually mattered. Then there was the camouflage system. You could change Snake's clothes and face paint to match the environment. The game gave you a camo index, literally showing you how visible you were in any situation. It made every encounter feel like a strategy puzzle. Do you blend in with the moss, hide in the mud, crawl into the brush? And the boss fights? They weren't just fights, they were statements. The Sorrow didn't even attack you. He made you walk through a river haunted by the ghosts of everyone you had killed. If you were non-lethal, short and easy. If you went full Rambo, it was a nightmare. Your own playstyle shaped this boss battle. Then there's the end. You could beat him with a sniper duel that could take hours, or just turn off the game for a week and let him die of old age. No joke, that level of freedom and creativity was unheard of, and it still blows minds today. And let's talk about the final boss, the boss. The story behind that fight is brutal. She trained Snake, she's basically his surrogate mother, and he has to kill her. Not because he wants to, but because politics and loyalty force his hand. It takes place in a field of white flowers that slowly turn red as the fight progresses. It's one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in gaming, and it's completely earned. The whole Cold War backdrop wasn't just window dressing either. It gave the game a tone that felt grounded, tense, and real. The story leaned into political manipulation, sacrifice, and betrayal, but it balanced that with James Bond-level style and even had its own theme song. Every system, every cutscene, and every line of dialogue, all of it worked together in harmony. Nothing felt bloated, nothing felt unnecessary. This wasn't just the best Metal Gear game, it was the tightest, smartest, and most emotionally resonant thing Kojima had ever made up until that point. This is the one that set the bar.
Snake. We found him. In the Middle East. Track him down.
Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots holds a Guinness World Record that no game should be proud of. A 71-minute cutscene. That's not a typo. 71 minutes straight. It was the moment where Kojima's love of cinematic storytelling went too far, and the gameplay paid the price. This was supposed to be Kojima's goodbye to the series, the final chapter, the one that tied up every loose thread from a saga that had been running since the 80s. The pressure to deliver was massive, and you can feel it in every second of the game. The shift to a more traditional third-person camera was a huge win. It made the game feel more fluid, more modern, and you can see more of the environment, aim more naturally, and the whole thing looked fantastic. But the actual game, the part where you play, was constantly interrupted. Every time you started to get in the groove, boom, another cutscene. 20 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Then the big one, 71 minutes of watching, not playing. And sure, it was well directed, packed with emotion, and full of answers, but by the end, you kind of forgot this was supposed to be a game. The story itself had some strong moments. Old Snake was a brilliant character, broken and tired, and still trying to do the right thing. The themes of aging, legacy, and control were handled with care. But the game was buried under the weight of its own expectations. It had to explain everything, connect everything, and satisfy everyone. Instead of letting the gameplay tell the story, it relied on endless exposition. Flashbacks, monologues, recaps. It tried to be the ultimate payoff, but instead, it ended up feeling a little bit like homework. And Kojima knew it. He talked about how tough it was to balance what fans wanted with what the story needed. But in the end, narrative completeness won out over pacing, and that 71-minute scene became a symbol of excess. It also marked a turning point in the industry. Developers saw what Kojima did and started questioning where the line was between films and games. Was it okay to make players sit through entire movies? Should games even try to be movies? The answer, at least in this case, was no.
You have no choice but to accept death. That is your true fate. One that even you cannot defy.
Metal Gear Solid 4 is packed with great moments, brilliant visuals and emotional beats, and a powerful send-off for one of gaming's best protagonists, but it's also a cautionary tale, a reminder that games are at their best when players are doing, not just watching. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker wasn't just a side project, it was a full-blown Kojima production packed into a PSP disc, and somehow it ended up being one of the most important games he ever made. Most people saw it as just the handheld one, but behind the scenes, Kojima was using it to experiment, not just with gameplay, but with structure. This was the test run for the next generation of how he'd make games. Instead of one long cinematic story, Peace Walker was broken into smaller missions. Some had full cutscenes, others were quick bursts of gameplay. You could play it in bite-sized chunks or marathon it for hours. It was built for flexibility, and it worked. This format would go on to shape the Phantom Pain, but Peace Walker made it work first. It also introduced the base building mechanic. You didn't just go out on missions, you came back with soldiers and gear to expand Mother Base. You weren't just Snake, you were a leader managing a growing private army. That changed how you approached every mission. Do you kill enemies, or do you knock them out and recruit them? And for a handheld game, the depth was ridiculous. R&D teams, Fulton balloons, mech boss fights, versus ops, co-op missions. It was like 5 games crammed into one, and it all ran on a PSP. The story dug deeper into Big Boss's ideology. This was where the shift really started. You began to see how he went from soldier to revolutionary, from following orders to questioning the whole system. It wasn't just set up for the Phantom Pain, it was the emotional groundwork. Peace Walker also marked Kojima leading harder into multiplayer ideas. Co-op stealth seemed impossible, but he made it work. Bosses designed for teamwork, gear you could share, missions that felt completely different with a friend. It showed he wasn't just thinking about solo experiences anymore. Kojima was experimenting within constraints, with limited hardware, limited screen, limited inputs, but still delivering one of the most expansive Metal Gear experiences ever. But unfortunately, people slept on it because it wasn't on a main console. However, these ideas would define Kojima's future, and they were born here. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain was Kojima's biggest swing, and it almost broke him. After years of working in tightly controlled environments, Kojima wanted freedom, for himself and for the player. So he blew up the old formula. No more linear levels, no more fixed paths. Instead, massive open maps, dynamic missions, and player-driven decisions. The result? One of the most mechanically perfect stealth games ever made. The movement felt incredible. You could dive, roll, crouch walk, sprint, ride horses, drive jeeps, hang off ledges. Every action was responsive, and every encounter had a dozen possible outcomes. You were not following a script, you were writing one with every move you made. And the multiple systems working behind the scenes in this game were pure chaos in the best way. There was weather, time of day, enemy alert levels, extracted resources, evolving base tech, and it all fed into a living ecosystem that reacted to you. If you sniped a guard, the next group might wear helmets. If you rely on night missions too much, enemies will start carrying flashlights and night vision goggles. The game adapted to you. The Fulton balloon became a perfect example of Kojima's weird genius. You could attach a balloon to anything, soldiers, sheep, tanks, and send it flying into the sky to collect for your base. It was absurd, hilarious, and somehow it worked perfectly. But while the gameplay was near flawless, the story was another story entirely. The first half of the game, pretty solid, great pacing, great reveals, and tons of buildup. Then it just ends. Chapter 2 feels like patchwork. Missions start repeating, plot threads dangle, huge questions go unanswered. It's like the back half of the game was ripped out, and in a way, it was. Behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Kojima and Konami were in a brutal power struggle. Budgets ballooned, timelines slipped, pressure mounted, and Konami started pulling back. Kojima's name was removed from marketing entirely. A mission explaining the real ending was cut as well. You can feel the tension. The game wants to say more, but it's muzzled. There's a brilliance in the Phantom Pain, but also silence where there should have been closure. Yet, even in its incomplete state, it's left a massive mark. Its open-ended design inspired a new wave of stealth and sandbox games. Its attention to player freedom and emergent systems set a new standard, and it proved Kojima didn't need cutscenes every 10 minutes to tell a story. He could let the gameplay speak for itself. The Phantom Pain was the peak of Kojima's vision and the end of his relationship with Konami. It's a masterpiece that feels haunted by what could have been. But while Kojima's bridges with Konami turned to ash, his creative fire was still raging, and it was starting to burn in a whole different direction: horror. Around the release of Metal Gear Solid 4, Kojima had started forming an unlikely friendship with filmmaker Guillermo del Toro. Two very different artists, one a cerebral, chain-smoking game director from Japan, the other a warm, wild-hearted Mexican filmmaker obsessed with monsters. Despite coming from different worlds, the chemistry was real. They bonded over movies, TV shows, and art. It felt like a creative match made in heaven. And what came out of that partnership was Playable Teaser, or what you may know it as PT. No press release, no hype campaign, just a mysterious demo that dropped on the PlayStation Store under a fake studio named 7780s Studio. Nobody knew what it was. You downloaded it, you walked through a looping hallway, and then things got very disturbing. The internet started piecing together puzzles, clues hidden in audio, in language, in sound files, ghostly apparitions, whispers, baby cries. God, the baby cries. A never-ending hallway that morphed with each loop. It was absolutely terrifying. Not with cheap jump scares either, but with a creepy dread feeling that stuck to your skin. Then came the final reveal once you completed the demo. This was actually a teaser for Silent Hills, directed by Hideo Kojima, in collaboration with Guillermo del Toro, of course, and it was starring Norman Reedus. The internet exploded. PT wasn't just a demo, it was lightning in a bottle. And then Konami killed it. See, as the rift between Kojima and the company widened, Silent Hills was quietly canceled. PT was removed from the store, not just delisted either. You couldn't re-download it from your library. The only way to experience it now is to find a PlayStation 4 that still has it installed, which often costs more than a new console. What we were left with wasn't just a lost game. It was a ghost. A ghost that haunts horror games today, redefining the genre. Layers of Fear, Visage, The Mortuary Assistant, all borrowed from it. Even Resident Evil 7 has PT's fingerprints all over it. And now, 10 years later, no game, indie or AAA, has captured that exact feeling of dread again. A once-in-a-lifetime collaboration. Kojima, Del Toro, Reedus, all at the peak of their powers, trashed before it had a chance to live. And yet, its impact didn't disappear. If anything, its absence made it stronger. PT became a modern myth, a kind of playable urban legend. The more Konami tried to bury it, the more it haunted the industry. Even to this day, people still analyze its files and speculate on its puzzles, wondering what Silent Hills could have been. And maybe that's the cruel beauty of it. It never got a chance to disappoint us. It never had to explain itself. It just kind of lingered. Even if Kojima and Konami made up tomorrow and Silent Hills was revived, it wouldn't be the same. Too much time has passed and that moment is gone. But the idea of it, the vision, the potential, it lives on, and you can see echoes of it in Kojima's next move. After everything that happened with Konami, most people thought Kojima was done, burned out, blacklisted. Maybe he'd go indie, maybe he'd disappear. But then, out of nowhere, Death Stranding was announced, with Norman Reedus, Mads Mikkelsen, Guillermo del Toro, and a trailer that made absolutely no sense. And it was beautiful. Kojima had full creative control for the first time in decades. No corporate oversight, no franchise to uphold, just him, a new studio, and the wildest idea he'd ever put in front of players. The game turned out to be about walking. Well, sort of. You're a delivery guy and you carry packages across a fractured post-apocalyptic America. No guns at first, no traditional missions, just solitude, terrain, and time. People called it a walking simulator. Others called it genius. What Death Stranding really did was ask a question. What if connection was the goal, not destruction? You weren't just moving through the world, you were rebuilding it. Every bridge you placed, every rope you dropped, every road you paved, it stayed there. Other players could use it. You were helping strangers you'd never meet. It turned asynchronous multiplayer into something emotional. The like system didn't just feed dopamine, it created warmth. It was a game about isolation, but it also made you feel connected. The game also reflected the moment it was released. In 2020, when the world went into lockdown, suddenly a game about distance, isolation, and quiet resilience felt more relevant than anyone could have ever predicted. We were all Sam Porter Bridges, carrying our own weight and trying to reconnect. Visually, it was stunning. The landscapes looked like they belonged on another planet, even though they were modeled after Iceland. The animation was near photoreal. The motion capture was next level. Kojima wasn't just flexing tech, he was making art with it. The cast was stacked, too. Performances were strong, and the story was weird, bloated, and confusing at times, but it also felt heartfelt. It wrestled with death, purpose, and what it means to leave something behind. And somehow, Kojima made walking tense. Climbing a slope with a full pack felt like defusing a bomb. Balance mattered. Every step was calculated. Add in BTs, timefall rain, and delivery routes across hostile terrain, and suddenly, traversal became strategy. Now, it wasn't for everyone, but that was the point. Death Stranding wasn't a crowd pleaser. It was a vision delivered without compromise, and proved that Kojima, even after everything, still had something to say, and a whole new way to say it. Now, I didn't make this video to convince you that Kojima is perfect, because he's not. The dude loves bloated dialogue, complicated plots, and making players watch more than they play, but even with all his flaws, he's doing something that most people in gaming aren't even trying to do. He's evolving, not just as a developer, but as a person. You can track it across every game. At first, he was obsessed with cinema. Then he tried to merge film and gameplay. Then he started to break down the very structure of what a game could be. And now, he's making stuff that asks real questions about life, death, isolation, and connection. What other game director does that?
I always told myself I'd always be in the front line creating video games, even when I reached 100. Now that's changed to, even after I die, even as a ghost, I'd still like to create games. It's so fun. The Japanese are not really good at expressing their thoughts with words, but I guess if I were to put it into simple words, I just love creating video games.
This video was never just about Kojima, it was about creative risk and how rare it is to see someone in this industry keep pushing even after success, even after failure. He didn't coast, he didn't play it safe. He kept making weird, difficult, personal work on a massive scale. And as a creator myself, I needed to see that because the truth is, this video really isn't about him at all. It's about me trying to understand how someone keeps going, how you survive failure, burnout, pressure, expectations, how you keep making things matter even when the world tells you to stop. I spent 30 days with Kojima's games, but I walked away learning something bigger. The best creators don't just build things, they build themselves over and over again. And with Death Stranding 2 now in the hands of gamers, the question isn't what Kojima will do next, it's whether we're ready for what he's trying to tell us about ourselves. Which Kojima title is your favorite of all time? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Making these videos takes a ton of time, but your support makes it all worth it.